Alright, our party is ready to get into the Grung Village, and then the Festival of Merit. Let's get to prepping. Alright, so here we are ready to prep for Session 2 of our Call of the Netherdeep campaign. First things first, I've gone through all of this prep already. We're going to go through it together and kind of let you know what I've done and how I hope the session will go. The first thing we're going to do when we get together and start to play is have a recap. The way that I do my recaps is I have a player volunteer to catch us up to speed with what happened last time. And hopefully, I'll ask for volunteers and hopefully someone will volunteer. If no one volunteers, I have everybody roll a d20, and the lowest roll is the one that will give us the recap from what happened in the last session. And the reason that I have my players do the recap and not me is twofold. The first reason is I want to know what they got out of the session. And usually the players will highlight the things that were the most important to them, or stood out the most to them. So I want to know what my players like. They've told me that once already. I asked for that in Session 0, but here in the recap, I can also get what they enjoyed most out of the last session. The second reason I have my players do the recap is so that I can find out where I'm falling short on the information I'm providing them. Because it's easy for me to unintentionally withhold information because I already know the background and the backstory and what's going on. So it's easy for me to just forget things that help build the world and make it more immersive. So I want to know what they remember so that I can know what I need to hit home harder. Like maybe they don't remember or don't know that the Jigow is so competitive. If that's the case, I'm going to remember that as we go through this session so that I can hit that home a little bit harder, and I'll take note of that. Once the recap's over, we'll jump into the session. We're following the instructions from Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master from Sly Flourish, but I tend to over-prepare a little bit just because that's the way that I like to do things. So the first step in that is to review our characters, and if you want to know more about them, you can check our Session 1 campaign diary, and I'll put a link for that up above. So we've got Chosen, the Bugbear Barbarian, Dimitri, our Gnome Fighter, Iris, our Halfling Warlock, Jimmy, our Sea Elf Druid, and Nell, our Human Rogue. Alright, so our strong start. This is something that I definitely recommend you do when you start your session. So right after the recap, we're going to jump right into something. It doesn't necessarily have to be combat, but combat helps. My players ended as they were approaching the Grung Village. They spotted 2 sets of Grung eyes. So that's where we're going to pick up. Right as they spot those eyes, I'll probably recap a little bit of that, re-describe what's happening. It's in the middle of the night, and then we'll jump probably right into combat would be my guess, but we'll see what the party wants to do. I've also got a reminder here for anyone who doesn't have dark vision, they will be rolling with disadvantage because I tend to forget small little details like that when I'm in the heat of battle. Next, we need to go over our scenes. The first thing we're going to do, obviously, is the Grung Village. That's right where we're headed. So this is straight from the PDF for the Great Grung Grab, and I've kind of familiarized myself with this. Here in Notion, I've got high-level overview of each of the different areas. So I've got, for example, in Area 1, the enemies, there are 2 Grung always posted guards here. As my party was approaching the village, there was a Grung ambush. They fought 4 Grung, one of them escaped. So even though it's the middle of the night, all of the Grung here are going to be alert and ready. So over here in location number 2 is the bunkhouse 2. It's got some Grung in it. There's some treasure down here. The shed up here has a bag of holding. That's something that I like to give my party pretty early on in a campaign, just so they have somewhere they can stash their stuff. Hopefully they'll find it. If not, we'll stick it in somewhere else that the party can get it. Area number 4 is the jail cell, and I'm going to add 2 Grung posted here, ready to protect the prisoners. Area number 5 is where our Grung leader is, as well as a whole bunch of henchmen. I think there's like 6 or something in here, and we'll see if our party decides to head that direction. Area number 6 is the apothecary, where we will have our little shaman who's creating the Grung potion vials. Hopefully they'll find some of those and some Grung darts. And then area number 7 is just another bunkhouse where a few more Grung can go. And then if my party happens to go in number 8, it's just a statue to the Great Grand Grung. They may end up clearing out the entire village, or they may just sneak in, grab the NPCs, and head out. I don't know. We'll have to see how this party goes about things. I'm not, this is only session number 2, so I'm not familiar with the way that they like to play. We'll see. We can go back to our session 2 notes. After they've dealt with the village, I suspect that they'll probably want to sleep as the resources have been expended. I'm sure some of them will be missing some HP. I don't know if they'll want to sleep in the village if it's cleared out, or if they'll want to sleep somewhere on the way back home. But when they do, I've got this here. Have them roll a random encounter with a d12. On an 11 or a 12, we'll have them fight something. Depending on where they're at, we'll determine the monster it is. If they're still in the swamp, we'll have them fight something swampy. If they're out on the wastes of Jorhas, it'll be something else. Eventually, they're going to come back to the city, and there are some... I assume they'll want to go talk to the elders and let the elders know what happened so that they can get their reward. And then at some point, I want an encounter with Nell's gang. I want them to come and approach her and say, hey, where have you been the last 24 hours? You didn't come back last night. Explain to us what's going on, essentially. Any coin that she makes, she's going to have to give them a cut. We'll see how that kind of plays out. The other thing that I want to introduce to Nell is the fact that the gang has a big job coming up, because the Festival of Merit, the finale, most of the townspeople are going to be at the finale, which opens things up for a heist. So I want them to be planning a heist on someone who's a little bit richer in the city and say, hey, we need you here to help us. Give her a little bit of conflict to see how she handles it. Maybe she asks the party for help, maybe she asks an NPC for help, or maybe she just ditches the party to go with the gang. I want to give her the opportunity to grow as a player character. So we'll see what happens there. I'm kind of interested to see, and I'll let you know in our next video how that goes. Also in the city, I want the party to be called upon by Elder Ushru again, so that we can get a little bit more tie into him and a little bit more familiar with him and a little bit more care about Elder Ushru to help him and his clan, or his horde, win the Festival of Merit. So we'll have him come over, have him talk strategy, have him let them know that, hey, yes, we're going to choose you to represent the Norgab Horde. We'll talk strategy about the different events that there are in the festival itself. So at this point, we'll talk about the 7 or 8 different events. We'll talk about the race. He can't give him too terribly much, but enough to say, hopefully the party will be able to determine X person goes and does the pie eating contest, somebody else will go do the maze, so on and so forth. At that point, once they're kind of done discussing and they've decided that a little bit, I'll have him mention offhandedly that Agath Silverspoon, his daughter who runs the Unbroken Tuscan, which they're familiar with, seemed to be acting a little bit odd when he went to visit. Just go maybe stop by and see how she's doing. So from there, I hope the party will go talk to Agath again, where she'll just say, hey, she's run out of her secret ingredient. There's a goblin down at the Meat Waters who can help her out, sells it to her. Would you guys mind going while she tends to the pies and whatnot that are currently cooking in the oven? So we'll have the party go down to Chabs, as his name. I'm kind of planning on having him be a peg-legged goblin. Just a little bit fun, interesting detail. Hopefully a little bit more memorable than just like a random goblin who's a fisherman down in the Meat Waters. They'll go down and he'll challenge them to a fishing competition, which I think will be fun. And then he'll try to make it a little interesting because competition is the way of things in Jigow. And they'll put some coin on it, maybe, if they're up for that, the party. If not, they'll just have the competition. And the way that I'm going to do this competition is a skill challenge that was brought to my attention by Matthew Colville. So I'll provide a link for this video in the description below. But essentially what happens is you put X number of successes or 3 failures, and you set a DC. So the DC that I've set is a 13. And then each party member will tell you from their list of the abilities that they're proficient in, how they're going to go about this ability check. So, for example, let's say our rogue is proficient in stealth, right? Maybe she's going to sneak in the shadows and wait for fish to come close and snatch them. Perfect. Go ahead and roll stealth. If you get above a 13, that's great. That's a success. We need 5 successes, and you beat our friend Chabs at the fishing competition. 3 failures, Chabs wins. So let's say our rogue can only use the stealth skill once. A different party member, if they're proficient in stealth, can also use stealth. So you can use the same abilities with different characters, but only one character can use the same ability one time. Matthew Colville does a really good job explaining this. If you're interested, go check it out. I highly recommend it. After the competition, we'll give them some time to finish out the day, and then when they are sleeping through the night, they'll progress to level 3. So we'll have them level up, which will take a little bit of time, I assume. So they're going to wake up in the morning, and it'll be the Festival of Merit. So this thing we've been building towards since the beginning of the campaign. And it's super important that we get a feel for the rivals, what they like, how they act, and whatnot, because we're going to have some actual real interactions with them during the festival. So it's important that we go back and refresh ourselves a little bit, and you can do that in the Call of the Netherdeep book. I also have created this, a relationship tracker for the rivals, and you can do this by PC. I'm probably going to end up doing it just for the party, how the rivals feel about the party themselves, and then if there's any like unique interaction that makes one of the rival members feel a particular way towards a member of my party, then I'll make a note of that just on the side, but you could track them by each PC. So I've also got the goals of each of the rivals here so that I can remember that, and any notes that you want to take, you can add that as well. So I printed it out and laminated it, and then I just use wet erase markers to track that. So everybody right now is indifferent, and we can mark that as we go. So the different events that we're going to have, the first, we're just going to go straight in order. The way that I'm going to work this is it is a competition, right? So that there are set times pretty much for each of the events, and I'm going to run them pretty close to the way that they are in the book. So the first one is the best pies in the jungle, and we are going to meet Irvin Wastewalker for the first time. This is chapter 1 of Call of the Netherdeep, and it's in D&D Beyond, so we're going to stick to this pretty close. The only difference is these we're going to determine winners and losers. And some of these it's pretty straightforward because they're like races and things, and others will have to be done in the background. The reason I'm doing it that way is so that at the end of the competition, it's pretty straightforward that the Gakthas Clan and the Norgab Horde are the winners, so they're the ones who are going to go into the Emerald Grotto. There will be other people who are competing in the events because it's a fun little thing that Jigow does. There will be some other smaller teams, but the two main ones every year are the Gakthas Clan and the Norgab Horde. Pies in the Jungle, it's pretty straightforward out of the book. I'm going to run it as is. I'm not going to make them pay. The costs for all of the competitions will be paid for by the Norgab Horde. And then if one of the party members wants to jump in on the side as well and not be like an unofficial contestant, that's totally fine. I'll make them pay the fee to get in. This is straightforward. You make some DC, I think you make constitution checks. The DC gets harder and harder for every pie that they eat, and then there's potential when you fail your save for you to get poisoned for an hour. We'll see how that goes. I'm hoping it goes really well. Winner gets the Medal of the Meat Pie, which we will hand out to our players. I've got them printed out on little pieces of paper. I created these on the website Homebrewery, and I've printed them to PDF, and I'll have links for these in the description as well. So I'll have magic item descriptions for those that would be found in Chapter 0, which is our pre-adventure, and then also all of the magic items you can find in Chapter 1. So you can download those if you'd like and print them off and hand them out to your players. The next event that we're going to run is the one-shot solution, and this is the maze. And because they helped Sharp Watch in our last session, I'm going to give them advantage on every check that they make because they're semi-familiar with the maze already, having spent some time in there and fighting some rats in there. So hopefully that goes really well. It'll be interesting to see Maggie and Dermot, who this is our party's first interaction with them. Maggie's trying to convince Dermot to go into the maze because Maggie can't quite fit. I've got a larger character as well, but Chosen has already gone into the maze and fought some rats, so he'll be able to fit, no problem. Maggie, on the other hand, unfortunately can't fit, so we'll see how that interaction goes and see how the party reacts to that role-playing. Next is the Ifolon Plunge, and this should be pretty interesting, I think. I'm actually going to pull open a map for the Ifolon Plunge, and we're going to do this on a map. Let's pull that open. This is something I got off the Call of the Netherdeep subreddit, and I'll put links for this map in the description below where you can get this, and we'll just run this out. They'll go grab the spear and come back, and we've got shadows of two little sharks, which is kind of an interesting twist. So my guess is my party is going to ignore that. Whoever it is going to ignore that, and they're going to try and help whoever's being attacked by the shark, based on the interactions we had in the previous session. I could be wrong, though. We'll see how it goes. My guess is Io is going to be the one who wins this. It'll be the first interaction we have with Io and Galsariad. After that, we're going to go straight to the Call of the Arms, which is the arm wrestling competition. I am going to make this work out so that Maggie and whoever our party member is will face off in the end. So it'll be more of a tiered structure. We're just going to run this where they're running straight up athletics checks one against the other. Probably Chosen will take this, but our Bugbear Barbarian will see. Next is Wetwalks Paddywhack, where there's a race to clear out your section of rice. And these two goblins are smart, and they are using you to help them harvest their rice. Our team will be competing against probably the Drow team, and I'm going to swap out the Orc team for two members of the rival party. I'll probably do Dermot and Irv, and we'll see how that goes, kind of give them a little bit more interaction, so on and so forth. And we'll probably follow this as closely to the book as we can, with the exception of swapping out the team. Next is herding the Horizonbacks, and I'm going to do this as kind of a time trial type event. You're not competing directly against another team, but you're going, and I'll keep track of how many rounds it takes and kind of judge how well they did. Use that to determine who the winner is. So this is one of the areas I can kind of fudge it a little bit. If they're just like smoking the rival party, then we can make it so the rival party wins this one, depending on how well they do. If they roll like all nat 20s, then they're obviously going to have to win, and I'll have to fudge somewhere else. But leaving myself the opportunity here to change things so that it's a little bit closer once we come to the final race. Last here is Riddles and Rhymes, and I'm just going to award the team points if they get the riddles right. And this is straight up, one person is going to be here, and hopefully they're clever enough to figure out the riddles. I'm a little bit nervous to see how this goes, but we're going to stick to the book almost exactly as is for this one. We'll read the little clues, and I'll read it to them a couple of times if they need it. They'll be there, and hopefully they can answer the questions correctly. So I'm going to throw in one more competition, the dance competition, into this, just because I've got a dancing bard, and the way that I got her to come into the party was because Pequena could get her dancing into the festival. It's going to be 3 performance checks added together, and the highest score wins. Right now I've got Dermot as the member from the rival party, but I may change that up a little bit. It looks like I've got him in here already, so we'll probably switch that out. I'm not sure exactly who I'll have, but we'll figure that out before we start our session. At this point, I think that's as far as we're going to get in our session. That's quite a bit. We've got an entire village potentially. We've got a few little side quests, and then there are 8 different competitions. My guess is that's about the amount of content we're going to get through in 3 hours. However, just in case, I've got the finale, which is the Emerald Grotto, and I've familiarized myself a little bit with that, so I know how to run it if needs be. And then we also got Nell's gang heist job. Worst case scenario, if I don't feel like we're prepared, I can end the session a little bit early and leave them on kind of a cliffhanger as we're approaching the finale. All right, once we're kind of comfortable with what's going to be happening in the session, we're going to go to our secrets and clues. As a refresher, these are just things that NPCs or random people say to the characters to get them more immersed into the world, and can also be breadcrumbs that lead them into the future adventure. So a couple of these I had for the last session weren't actually mentioned, so I have rolled them forward to this one. We can maybe use them this time. Like Io and Dermot have been doing odd jobs and are trying to earn the interest of one of the factions. The final contest this year is rumored to be a race. The Auroran Watch doesn't enter the team because Dirth hates the headdress. We've got one that says the fishermen were taken as slaves by the Grung, which is why they disappeared. Most of the city will be at the final event for the Festival of Merit, so this is kind of leading into the idea that there's an opportunity here for a heist. Then the Gakthas Clan has picked the party who'll be representing them in the festival, and this is going to be the rival party. There are other people who like to participate in the contest, as well as the two teams from the Gakthas Clan and the Norgab Horde, so that, again, just introducing the idea that, yes, there may be other competitors there. And then there is has been a rise in low-level gang activity noticed by the Aurora Watch. So these are all different things that I may throw in at various points just to make the world seem more full. Next is locations, and these are just maps and things. We've got the Grung Village, I've got the Festival of Merit, and links for all of those are up above. And then lastly is the Emerald Grotto, which we haven't completely filled out here in Notion, but we will before our next session. Next, we need to review the NPCs that will potentially be met during our session. So we've got Bogat, Arab, and Yuka, who are the orc fishing party and friends of Zar, who they will run into for sure in the prison of the Grung Village. Then we've got Zar. They have potential to come back and talk to Zar and say, hey, we rescued your friends. If that's the case, I've got a little place to link to her and find her real quick. Dirth Mirim, who's the head of the Auroran Watch, Elder Kolbu Kaz, who's the head of the Gakthas Clan, and Elder Ushru, who's head of the Norgab Horde. Then we've got Pequeña, who they will probably see again, Aga Silverspoon, who they will probably see again, and then Chabs, who I'm hoping they go and see, as well as a bunch of the NPCs who aren't super memorable, who are running the different festival events. All right, monsters. There are a bunch of them in this one. In the Grung Village, we've got a handful of different Grung variations, as well as the poisonous snakes, and these are just links straight to the D&D Beyond stat blocks. So you can see I can just click on that, pull these up, and I'll have them in front of me so that I can run the monsters as needed. In the Festival of Merit, there are a couple of sharks that they may run into, and then here's the stats for the Horizonback tortoises they have to herd. And then if they get to the Emerald Grotto, there's a giant octopus and a shark that they may run into, so I've got stat blocks for those. Treasure. Now this is a big section because they're going to be going to the Grung Village, which has a bunch of treasure. Every event in the Festival of Merit has a medal that they can earn, and then inside the Emerald Grotto itself there are some magic items that can be found. So I've got links for all of the descriptions for all of those, and then again I've got these little printable things that you can pull off the PDF. I've got links for those in the description, so you can go grab those. There are a couple custom items that I have added. The Medal of Glamour is one, which gives you advantage on charisma checks and saving throws for 1 hour after you whisper into the medal, which has the same flavor of some of the medals here, but there wasn't a charisma one, and that fit in perfect with the theme of the dance competition. So the winner of the dance competition will get this guy. One other thing that I've added, which will be more relevant once we get to the Emerald Grotto, and I've got this just in case they get there, is there's a spear that's attached to the shark, and I've made that a +1 moon-touched spear, so you can find a description for that in the PDF, and I've got a link for that in the D&D Beyond as well. Here's a little section for session notes. We'll do that as soon as the session's over. I'll type those out real quick, and then here's my things to create, so I may have to make sure that I do this every time, is print these guys, add custom items to D&D Beyond, so the moon-touched spear has been added, as well as the Medal of Glamour, so that my players can add them to their character sheets on D&D Beyond. And then I've got minis printed for some of the enemies. The other thing I did is create an underwater adventuring information sheet for my DM screen. And that looks like this. And I created this with Homebrewery as well and created the PDF, and I'll have a link for that in the description as well. Let's pull that up actually so that you can see it here on screen. So this is what it looks like. It's got the underwater adventuring rules from both the player's handbook and from the beginning chapter of Call of the Netherdeep. So it has swimming rules. It costs an extra foot to swim. There's some checks, underwater encounter distance, how far you can see, as well as some of the rules for underwater combat. So that I've got these in front of me, and I will hang this up on my DM screen because it's going to be important once we get to the Emerald Grotto, and the Ifolon Plunge, I think, will also take into effect the swimming rules and whatnot. So I felt like this is a good time to put this together, and here it is. Feel free to download that and use that as well. And that's it, really. That's my prep for session 2. Hopefully we get into the festival, have a really good time. I'm really looking forward to this. We're actually getting into the meat and bones of the book now. And from here, we should start to see some fun. That's all I've got, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. Let me know how your adventure is going in the comments down below. And subscribe if you're not. And we'll catch you in the next one.